So what's up YouTube? In today's video, we're going to get into should you become self-taught, go to boot camp, or go to college to become a software engineer. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe below. My name is Kenny G. I'm an iOS engineer. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. All right, to kick things off, we're going to first start off with being a self-taught engineer. So if you want to become a self-taught engineer, essentially that just simply means that you're going to go through the process of making sure you learn everything you need to know to become job ready. If you're going to go through that process, let me kind of help you out a little bit to at least give you down the right path that you'll need in order to get yourself hired. So if you want to become a software engineer, there's a ton of different lanes that you can go into to become a software engineer. You can become a game developer, an iOS engineer, mobile engineer, front-end engineer, back-end, blockchain engineer, and so forth. So with there being so many different lanes of engineering, you need to, one, decide on what type of software engineer you truly want to become. And from there, once you figure that out, then you move forward into the next step, which is deciding on how you want to go about becoming that type of software engineer. So a couple of places you can go to get yourself job ready. First thing first, I personally would just recommend that you look into Udemy first, and then from Udemy you can decide if you want to go through Coursera. They have a ton of courses as well, or you can go on YouTube and you can go to, I think it's Harvard CS50. They have a pretty good course on software engineering or pretty much going through computer science. But I would highly recommend you go through Udemy first. And the reason I personally suggest this is that if you're someone who has no coding experience but you want to learn how to code, first things first is you need to go through a course that at least get you, one, a little bit of understanding around how to actually write code. Then from there, you need something to kind of jumpstart you in building some kind of project. And that's one of the beauties of going through Udemy, is because of the fact that Udemy is going to help you get started with a project and going from there. Now, I'm not sponsored by Udemy by no means, but I've done a ton of Udemy courses, and I've also helped people go through a Udemy course to at least get them started so they're in the right lane of where they want to go. Because you may decide in the beginning that you may want to do front-end development. You start with front-end, then you realize front-end isn't what you want to do. Then you may shift over to game development. You go into game development, realize that's not the lane you want to go into. And then from there, you may just land in back-end development, and that may be the one area where you seem to thrive in. So I suggest you decide on what you want to do. Go through a Udemy course. They're relatively cheap. They're probably like around $10 or so. I think the most I've ever paid for one is maybe like $20, just to be honest with you. But by going through those courses, I was able to at least learn about how different parts of software engineering work, whether that's front-end, back-end, DevOps, data scientists, whatever. And then from there, I was able to narrow the scope into what I truly wanted to do. So for me, when I first graduated college, I really wasn't sure what area of software development I wanted to go into. First, I started off being a full stack developer, which was cool, but I really wanted to go into something else. Game development was one area I fell in love with, but I really fell in love with being a mobile engineer. That's why I'm an iOS engineer now. So Udemy is a great place to go ahead and get started in. Just for the simple fact, you'll know what you need to know to at least get started. Two, you'll have a project to keep you going. And then from there, it'll be your jump start into going into a full-fledged course on software development. Now, once you've gone through Udemy, the next step I would probably recommend is either go with Harvard CS50 online or finding like a Coursera course online. They'll teach you everything you need to know from beginning to end, and then just go through either of those two, and they'll at least teach you all the fundamentals you need to know around software development as well as computer science. Now, as you're going through Coursera's course or going through Harvard CS50 course, the next thing, honestly, I would recommend while you're doing this at the same time is work on a personal project. Reason I say this is because Harvard CS50 or Coursera course that you may be taking may not be using the language of the choice in which you want to go into. But say you're a front-end developer and you wanted to do, front end, and you can be using JavaScript. The CS50 course for Harvard, they may be using Python or some other language. But if you continue to build out projects using JavaScript, one, you'll have much more knowledge around the language you're using, as well as you'll have a project that you've worked on personally. And with that project, I would highly recommend you post that project on GitHub. Just by having it on GitHub, one, it'll help you out later down the line when an employer wants to look at the project. You can have them go to your GitHub account, and then from there they can download the project, look at your code, so forth from there. But you want to do both at the same time, because one, you're learning as well as you're also building your skills up in whatever language that you're going to be using. With doing your personal project as well as going through a course, the course, number one, is just going to make sure it molds in all those things that you're going to be learning from your personal project. It's going to help you out tremendously. Once you've done that and you finished a course, as well as you've built out at least one personal project, and you have it up on GitHub. The next big step, make sure that you go ahead and try to learn your data structures and algorithms. The reason I say this is because you're self-taught, and with you being self-taught, 9 times out of 10, an employer may or may not hit you with those data structure and algorithm problems. And just being honest, you don't want to walk into an interview not knowing how to solve any of these problems. At least be able to solve the easy ones for the most part and some of the medium problems. And also make sure you have the fundamentals down on how to actually build out a project or build out some small features or little things that you may see online on what they may ask of you if you're going through an interview. So that's just my tip on that. I know some companies, they ask for a feature. Some companies give you take-home projects, but those are great to at least showcase your skills. And then some companies rather you go to a whiteboard and just solve a data structure or algorithm problem. Now, being completely honest, if you're going to go through the self-taught route, this is the hardest route to go, just because you're going to have to do an extensive amount of research into whatever lane you want to go into, whether that's front end, back end, or whatever. And you need to make sure you're job ready prior to getting hired. And it's really hard to know when you're job ready, just because there's so much knowledge that you can learn from any of these areas of programming, whether it's back end or whatever. So make sure you go through a course, make sure you get all the knowledge that you can through that course, work on a personal project, at least 1 or 2, honestly. Put it out to the world so people can see. If you know someone else who is a developer, ask them to chime in and look at the code that you've written and give you honest feedback around what you've written. And then from there, make sure you know your data structures and algorithms. And outside of that, just keep applying to a ton of companies and then just see how that works out. So the next area is a boot camp. So boot camp is great, just for the simple fact that with most boot camps, they at least give you all the information you need to at least get you job ready. Once being job ready, you'll then be able to actually go into the world and apply for different companies and see which companies will hire you based on the skills that you've learned or obtained from going through an actual boot camp. Now, here's the caveat to boot camps. Well, a lot of boot camps, hate to say it, it's all about what you put into the boot camp that you're going through. Also, you need to do an extensive amount of research around some of these boot camps, because not every boot camp will get you to the point where you are job ready. So I would highly recommend you look deeply into the boot camp that you're going to be going into, whatever paradigm that they have you set up with. And this also piggybacks off of what I said before. We're going through a Udemy course first. Regardless of whichever direction you go into, college, boot camp, self-taught, please go through a Udemy course, just because some of these boot camps, for example, they won't even pick you up unless you have some kind of coding experience. So you want to make sure you have some type of coding experience underneath your belt prior to applying. Now, some of these boot camps will pick you up with no experience, but a lot of them want you to have at least a little bit of knowledge around what programming is, how to write at least a for loop, if statement, something simple as that. But then from there, they'll teach you everything else you need to know to go ahead and get yourself hired by an employer. Also, when you go to these boot camps, make sure whoever you're talking to, whether it's an instructor or whomever, before you apply, you ask a lot of questions, especially questions around, what is the success rate of the students that come in and they go through their boot camp and they get hired? Do they have any companies on hand that they know that they usually pick up most of their students after they finish the course? Also ask them, will they teach you the data structures and algorithms that you'll need to know prior to getting hired at some of these top tech companies? If you're wanting to go into, these top tech companies, ask a ton of questions. Make sure the instructor that you end up getting is a great instructor. I know personally someone who's gone through a boot camp, and the boot camp itself was great, but the instructor wasn't. So they didn't get all the information that they wanted to get out of the boot camp because of the instructor. So do your own due diligence. Make sure you learn the things that you need to. The boot camp, the way it's going to go is probably going to be either 3 months, 6 months, some do 9 to 12 months. But when you go through this boot camp, just give a brief overview. They're going to teach you everything you need to know about whatever software development lane you decide to go into. The boot camp is going to be pretty intense. It's going to spend a couple of hours a day sitting at the boot camp, working with other students, whatever paradigm that you end up going with. From there, you'll have homework, just like if you're going through school. So you'll have homework you'll need to work on. The homework will be closely tailored to whatever you just learned in class. And then when you go back to class, you'll go back through learning more and more and more. The biggest difference between being self-taught and a boot camp, to me personally, is the fact that when you're going through a boot camp, you're being forced to make sure you learn this information quickly. So when you learn this information, you'll probably one part of the class, they'll be teaching. The next part, you're actually writing code. And it's the same setup completely. So you'll hear teaching, write code, have homework. Then again, next day, teaching, writing code, homework, and it's the same setup until you have everything you need to know to get hired. And in between that, you're also going to be working on projects by yourself, and sometimes you may work on projects with teams, just to ensure that you fully are immersed in this new area in which you're learning for software development. And once you're pretty much good from there, obviously you'll graduate. Once you graduate, then from there, you'll go through the process of actually trying to get hired. And that's kind of how that goes. Other thing with boot camps is, how you pay for it. Some boot camps require you to pay for everything up front. Other boot camps, you'll pay half up front, half later. Some have it set up where you may pay half later once you get hired, and then take a certain percentage around how much you make from whatever company you work for. And there are a few out there, I'm not totally sure on this, but I think there are a few where they won't even charge you anything until you're actually hired. And then once you're hired, they'll take a certain percentage of wherever your salary is or whatever company you get hired for. To me personally, I think the boot camp is probably like kind of in the middle. It's not the easiest route, but it's definitely not the hardest route. But it's the route in which you do need to put in a lot of work also, almost as much work as you would need to put in to be self-taught. So the last one is going to college. So if you go to college, obviously you'll probably 9 times out of 10 just get a CS degree. Having that CS degree does put a lot of comfort around most companies when they want to look into hiring you, just because of the fact that, hey, you have a computer science degree, especially if it's from a pretty good school. Also, the other big thing when you go to college is the fact that you can go on and try to get internships. Getting an internship while you're in school is the best thing you can do, just because of the fact that once you get an internship, you can obviously work for these companies on hand. I would honestly say try to get an internship at your junior year all the way up to your senior year. Work for different companies, figure out what you want to do in different lanes. Again, use Udemy first, then just figure out what you want to do, whether it's game development, back end, so forth. Working for these companies will help you tremendously get a bit of an understanding around what tech stacks they're using, how things will go when you on a day-to-day basis when you're working for a company. Now, big thing with these internships, a lot of these internships may want you to have, obviously a project you've worked on. They may give you a coding test or something like that, which is probably 9 times out of 10 gonna be somewhere around data structures and algorithms. So make sure you just know those. Even if you're a freshman, try to learn those early, and then they'll just help you out tremendously once you try to get hired. But the great thing with an internship is the fact that when you go through an internship, it kind of sets you up to get hired later if you decide you want to work for that company, especially once you hit senior year. Because I know for me, I did get an internship my senior year. I mean, it was pretty hard to get one from, I want to say, freshman to junior year. But by senior year, I had an internship, and honestly, I ended up getting a full-time job prior to me even graduating. So that's another thing you want to look forward to when going to college. And to me, college is the easiest route. But I have to be honest, I do know people that went to college for a CS degree, and I hate to say it, great number of people I've met that graduated with a CS degree and they still didn't get hired by a company. So again, make sure you put in the legwork to get yourself hired by these companies. Once you graduate with either a college degree or you graduate from a boot camp, 9 times out of 10, well, I ain't gonna say 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, you and the people you graduated with, you're all gonna be competing for the same job. So make sure that you know the things that you need to know. You put in the legwork, you study as hard as you can in college as well as boot camp to get yourself hired. When you go the self-taught route, it's a little bit different. Self-taught is kind of a numbers game. You just apply to as many companies as you can. Practice with some of these companies as far as interviews goes. Some companies, they're just flat out not going to answer you back. Some companies will. And then from there, you'll learn the do's and don'ts when you're going through an interview. From there, it'll just help you out tremendously. What you're looking for, in all honesty, regardless of which 3 lanes you go into, what you're looking for in all 3 of these lanes is someone to give you a shot. Once you have that shot in which you can get hired by somebody, take the offer. If you can get a ton of offers, that's even better. But if you know you're someone who struggled with programming and you're trying to get yourself there, see if someone can give you a shot and get yourself hired, and working with a team of other engineers who can help mold you and teach you some of the things that didn't sink in with you when you went through either college, boot camp, or when you're being self-taught. And lastly, I gotta say this, and I have to say it, don't jump into this just because you want to make money. I know I said this in another video, but I just gotta make sure I echo this again. Make sure this is something that you truly want to do. If you do it for the love of the money, I hate to say, but probably not gonna put in the work to learn more while you're actually working in the career. 9 times out of 10, you'll probably just slack up, not want to continue to learn. And by doing that, that'll mess you up in the long run, especially when you decide to go with other companies, just because of the fact that you want to grow as you're going through this process of becoming a senior engineer, architect, whatever. You don't want to stay in the same area. You don't want to be a junior engineer forever. And I know a lot of engineers, they kind of sit in their pocket of being a mid-level engineer, and a lot of people stay as a mid-level engineer practically their whole career. but you do want to grow, it'll just help you out as well. Not only just you'll make more money, but you'll be able to go back and teach other engineers how to get to the same spot you're in. So with that being said, I just want to thank you guys for watching the video. Obviously, again, make sure you put in the legwork in any of these 3 lanes you decide to go into. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.